Uniques will probably be some of the most sought after items once Diablo 4 drops in June, and that's due to the fact that they oftentimes augment skills in really cool ways, or essentially can be considered best in slot considering what they exactly offer to a specific build. Fundamentally, you get two different flavors of uniques, and that is that you get non-class specific uniques, which tend to be a little bit more generic in the bonus that they offer, and these fit on any of the classes and potentially any of the builds. And then you have class specific uniques, which tend to hone in on a specific skill or a specific playstyle and essentially become a unique way to push that. Now, a few of these have already been leaked by Blizzard, but most of these items have actually been found by data miners. Now, it's entirely possible that we will get more uniques once the game actually launches, but we have quite a sizable chunk of them to look at already. I've already created a video looking at the non-class specific uniques, but today, boy oh boy, and I've been waiting for this, we are looking at the barbarian uniques. Diving right in, we have 100,000 steps or 100k steps, depending on what you want to call this, which is a unique set of boots for the barbarian. This has attacks reduce evades cooldown. This has dexterity, damage when swapping weapons, damage to stunned enemies, and then last but certainly not least, ranks to ground stomp. So this is kind of like honing in specifically on ground stomp. Now, the aspect here says that after gaining the final damage bonus from the Walking Arsenal key passive, which is unique of course to the barbarian, you automatically cast ground stomp and gain 32 to 50 fury, depending on of course the quality of the unique that you get. This cannot happen more than once every 30 seconds. I think this is pretty cool because of the fact that this basically gives you access to ground stomp, where presumably you don't have to have it on your cast bar, you don't have to have it as an actual skill that you use. So that's pretty cool. Ground stomp can of course be augmented in ways to essentially stun enemies longer and, you know, some other effects, but I think this will probably be like the base version of ground stomp, if I can put it that way, so unaugmented. But if you also look at the rest of the item is all about dealing damage to stunned enemies and essentially giving you more ranks in ground stomp. So this is kind of okay. I think it's essentially a way for you to tap into, you know, like a 7th skill. The barbarian is already so benefited from the fact that they have access to more legendary aspects, or more aspects in general, due to the arsenal system, due to the fact that they can carry 4 weapons and simultaneously benefit from all 4 of them. And this is just fitting the tone of that even more, just giving you more. So I think this is pretty cool. I do, however, you know, not like the fact that these boots don't have movement speed plus on them, which is generally what you want in that slot. I think in your boots and your amulet is where you can actually roll this, so that's the one thing that unfortunately this doesn't have on it, but other than that I can't complain too much. Next we have Ancient's Oath, which is a unique two-handed axe. This rolls with damage to healthy enemies, meaning like, you know, enemies that are above 80% of their HP, so brand new enemies, you're dealing more damage to them. You have damage to slowed enemies. You have vulnerable damage, which is you're dealing more damage to enemies that have vulnerable on them, and enemies that have vulnerable on them are already taking more damage as well, so good shit. And then we have damage while berserking, and we have ranks to Steel Grasp. Steel Grasp is of course the skill that looks like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Get over here, you know, that shit. So this obviously then focuses on that skill, and the aspect then says that Steel Grasp launches 2 additional change. Enemies hit by Steel Grasp are slowed for 3 seconds. So I definitely think there surely is a place for Steel Grasp in PvE. I think it's really good in situations where you're dealing with enemies that don't actually run up to you and, you know, fight you. This can be very good at grabbing enemies that try their best to evade you and pelt you with damage from afar. This can be good, but I really think Steel Grasp is probably going to be like the shit in PvP. I think PvP, unless it devolves into a one-hit monstrosity where essentially it's just about who pulls their skill off first to kill the enemy player, honestly, we haven't seen a lot of PvP footage, if any, for that matter, to, you know, make any form of, you know, educated guess at this point in time. But if PvP is a genuine thing where it's like a push and pull, you know, of using the right skills at the right time, trying to CC the enemy player so that you can get damage in on them, you know, when they try to get away from you, finding a way to get them back to you, then Steel Grasp is really going to shine there, especially due to the fact that it ends up slowing the enemy as well. So yeah, I really think this is probably going to be maybe better in PvP, but who knows? Like I said, it depends on the enemy types, everything like that. And certainly in on a class which predominantly deals its damage in melee range, you certainly can benefit from stuff that pulls stuff into melee range so that you can kill it. Then we have Battle Trance, which is a unique amulet. This is gonna get resistance to all elements on it, which is really good. Some of the other ones we looked at yesterday was like resistance to one element. This is just resistance to all elements. I love it. Then basic skill damage, damage reduction from close enemies, damage reduction when injured, and ranks to frenzy. So overall, some really good defensive stats on there, and then giving us some additional ranks to frenzy, and then with an aspect that says that increases frenzy's maximum stacks by 2. While you have maximum frenzy, your other skills also get an increased attack speed based on percentage of what rolls on this item. So frenzy itself is a skill that essentially with every hit that you hit, you start hitting faster, and it's basically like spinning up a chainsaw. And this will give this 2 additional stacks on top of it, which will mean 2 additional stacks of faster attack speed. And then once you hit maximum frenzy, you're going to get this increased attack speed on your other skills as well. Now, presumably this increased attack speed to your other skills is based on the same cooldown as frenzy. And how frenzy works is you have to keep hitting enemies to keep it stacked up. After a while, those stacks essentially start falling off the same way that you stack them on. So this can be kind of cool. There was a time when I thought frenzy was like the best shit ever, and that time might come back. Yeah, it certainly is interesting that if you think like, okay, cool, like you can increase your other skills with like, let's say 10% attack speed, which doesn't sound like a lot, but can, make the difference, between, how many core skills you can push out in a row before you run out of your your primary resource. So I don't know. I'm not really feeling this. I do think like some of the other stats on here are good, but I don't know. This is not something that I'm necessarily excited to get to drop. Then we have Fields of Crimson, which is a unique two-handed sword. This comes out with critical strike damage, damage with two-handed slashing weapons, which this is of course it. It has a damage over time effect, a dot. Cooldown reduction for rupture and ranks to rupture. Now rupture is of course all about bleed damage, so it makes sense that this essentially stacks your damage over time. Now I think bleed is one of the better mechanics for the barbarian. I like it. I think it combos very well with if you want to do something like a Thorns barbarian. So this then says the aspect, while using this weapon, damaging at least one enemy with rupture creates a blood pool that inflicts bleeding damage over 6 seconds. Enemies standing in this pool also take increased bleed damage. So one of the things that I would say is a downfall or is a downside rather to bleed is because a lot of the effects that causes bleed cause that effect to one target. And oftentimes you look for ways of trying to spread that bleed as fast as possible so that you can get that dot on as many enemies as possible, because there's a lot of aspects that give you additional effects and stats and things like that based on how many enemies are bleeding around you. And this is a phenomenal way of actually spreading that bleed around. So I like this. I'll probably end up trying this out. I'll definitely be building some kind of, first off when the game starts, I'll be building some kind of like weird Thorns bleed monster. And I think this could be interesting. Then we have Gore's Devastating Grips, which is a unique set of gloves. This comes with attack speed, lucky hit chance, fury on kill, and ranks to whirlwind. Now already this thing has me there. I'm a huge fan of spin to win, baby. Whirlwind is the bomb. And this essentially says that whirlwind explodes after it ends, dealing a percentage of the total base damage dealt to the surrounding enemies as fire damage. Now there's a bunch of, look, I think by default whirlwind is not that powerful. It's a little bit underwhelming, but whirlwind is one of those, it's a grower not a shower, baby. As you stack more and more aspects onto whirlwind, it becomes ridiculous. There's for instance an aspect that essentially hoovers the enemies up on top of you, so that you don't necessarily lose those moments where you're trying to spin out to an enemy that's running away. So every once in a while you'll have this like AoE vacuum effect pulling enemies onto you, and then the whirlwind's hitting them. You also have another one which periodically will send out like little mini whirlwinds out from you, and these ones will deal further on damage out to enemies further. There's also some other ones, but the point is, as you start stacking more stuff onto Whirlwind, it becomes a very, very attractive choice, and this certainly is one of them. Then also looking at the fact that this has Fury on kill, which means that it's refilling your primary resource, which Whirlwind is very hungry for. It uses a lot of Fury, so I think this is pretty cool. I'm excited to get me some Gore's Devastating Grips. Then we have another unique two-handed mace called the Hellhammer. This has overpowered damage, damage with two-handed bludgeoning weapons, which this is one of, damage to crowd-controlled enemies, damage to burning enemies, and then ranks to Upheaval. Upheaval is the other skill that I really, really like. I think it performs exceptionally well. Just base Upheaval is really, really strong. And once you start putting some stuff on here, then it gets pretty spicy. Now, I don't think necessarily that the aspect here disappoints. This says that Upheaval ignites the ground, burning enemies for an additional damage over time. So how Upheaval works, of course, is it's like a common attack in front of you, and it like rips up the ground and like hits the enemies. Now this will then ignite, obviously, presumably the same ground area that's just been lifted will then become essentially a burning AoE that will burn for some damage over time. And basically Upheaval has a huge amount of like just, you know, pay off damage, so this just stacks on a dot behind that. It's a way of just further on squeezing additional damage out of the skill, and I think it's pretty cool. I'm there for it. Then we have another unique two-handed mace, and this is called Overkill. This has overpowered damage as well, damage to injured enemies, critical strike chance against injured enemies, damage on elite kill, and ranks to death blow. I think Death Blow is pretty good. I experimented with it quite a lot during the both beta weekends. I like the damage that you were able to get out of this skill, and the aspect here says that Death Blow creates a shockwave. So how Death Blow works predominantly, you know, usually straight out the fucking box, Death Blow, what it does is you wait until an enemy is within killing, let's say killing range in terms of their HP. You hit them with the Death Blow. That deals a huge amount of damage to enemies the lower their HP is. That kills them, and that resets the Death Blow, and you can use it again. So in a case of where you're fighting 3 or 4 or 5 tough enemies, or let's make it more spicy, let's make it 2 weak enemies and 2 tough enemies. You focus on dropping the 2 tough enemies down a little bit, and then you just go like whack-a-mole, Death Blow, Death Blow, Death Blow, Death Blow, and fucking, you know, that's all she wrote. Now this says that Death Blow creates a shockwave, dealing a percentage of its base damage to enemies. So now it's not just about hitting one enemy anymore. Now it's creating a shockwave, it's creating an AoE around your target, and this says that enemies who die to this effect also reset Death Blow's cooldown. So in just exactly that analogy that I just made, where I said 2 weak enemies and 2 tough ones, and now you weaken the 2, you know, tough ones first before you whack them all of them. Now you don't even have to do that. Just concentrate on the 2 tough guys, and as soon as you get one of them down to the point, you go Death Blow, and that's most likely going to kill the little babies next to him as well, or at the very least get them close to that range, and then you're just going to go Death Blow, Death Blow, everything's dead. So a cool way of essentially augmenting Death Blow. The same things that I said about Whirlwind count here as well. Death Blow also has some really good legendary aspects which you can leverage and load into that really turn this skill into something special. So again, really excited for that. Then our second last item is a unique chest armor called Rage of Harrogath, and this has physical damage on it, physical critical strike chance against elites. It has damage reduction from bleeding enemies, and it rolls with thorns. Now this has lucky hit on it, meaning that you have to have a skill that procs a lucky hit, and then there's a chance 20 to 40% to reduce the cooldowns of your non-ultimate skills by 1.5 seconds when you inflict bleeding on elites. Now that's a lot. Just unpacking it here, if you get a lucky hit, then there's a chance that you will reduce the cooldowns of all of your non-ultimates. So let's say you have Upheaval in there, and you have Ground Stomp in there, and you have Leap in there, whatever. I'm just, you know, saying skill names now, but the point is, any of your skills except for your 3 ultimate skills will then have their cooldowns reduced by 1.5 seconds when you inflict bleeding on an elite. This would have been good if it was just up to this. Well, this would have been ridiculously good if it was up to the point where it just said when you inflict bleeding. But this says when you inflict bleeding on elites. So in most cases, you'll fight an elite pack, and maybe this elite pack has 3 to 5 enemies in it. So every once in a while, you're going to be able to like just dumpster like an elite squad, and you're going to be able to refresh your cooldowns super fast. And that's probably going to be, you know, I would say kind of like effective, due to the fact that it's inflict bleeding on elites. So if there's 3 elites, you inflict it on all of them and you roll the chance on all of them, then you're gonna get like a 4.5 second reduction on all your stuff. So there's a lot of things that need to click into place for this. I think the percentages are really low. Lucky hit itself, you're gonna have to augment your lucky hits to get them quite regularly. I don't know, maybe this works in something like with a frenzy build where you're hitting fast and you're getting a lot of like mileage out of those hits, and then, you know, like if you're hitting like 10 times every 2 seconds, then, you know, lucky hit might proc more often and you might get this. But I don't know, this is not really blowing my hair back. And then last but not least, we have Ramaladni's Magnum Opus. I like the last part of this name more. Ramaladni's Magnum Opus. That just rolls off the tongue right there. This is a unique one-handed sword, and this has a critical strike damage, damage with dual-wielded weapons, damage to close enemies, physical damage, and then last but not least, lucky hit up to a 5% chance to restore your primary resource, which of course is Fury. Now, the aspect here says that skills using this weapon deal a percentage increased damage per point of Fury you have, but you lose 2 Fury every second. This could potentially be nasty in a situation where you are basically accumulating a huge amount of your primary resource. So let's imagine you're playing a 3-shout barbarian. You're using the right aspects, that you're getting more fury when you have your shouts active. You have increased primary resource regeneration on as many items as possible. So you are just, whenever you go into a fight, you have like a fury overflow. In those cases, then this says that this is increased damage per point of fury that you have. If you have 100 points of fury, that's essentially like 100% more damage, but you lose 2 fury every second. Now let's say at that moment when you're at 100 fury, you can dump like 2 or 3 upheavals, and those upheavals are just gonna chunk really hard. Or you use this in a whirlwind build, where whirlwind does drain your fury quite fast, but again, there are ways for you to essentially refill your fury quite furiously while you are whirlwinded, by again stacking your aspects correctly. And then you just have this like ridiculously heavily scaled whirlwind that essentially just cuts the stuff. Maybe you can't whirlwind as long as you can while not wearing this item, but while you do whirlwind, you deal like 100% or 150 or 200% additional damage, which is ridiculous. And that's it. That's the list of uniques that I was able to find for the barbarian that has either been leaked or been data mined or something like that. Again, like I said, there could be more of these, and either which way, I'm just excited for it. Some of these are kind of spicy, and I'm looking forward to getting them to drop once we actually get to World Tier 3, because of course that's what we need to do to be able to get these into our hands. Now, speaking about getting things into our hands, I do also just want to remind you that I am giving away 3 copies of the base version of Diablo 4 on the platform of your choice. And to be able to win one of those copies, all you need to do is find the video in the description of this video. It looks like this, and you simply follow the instructions in that video. It's a short little Google form that you have to fill out, and then on the 1st of June on a live stream on this channel, I will be pulling those 3 winners, and I sincerely hope you can be one of them. I also hope that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. Until next video, fucking cheers.